Shalom and welcome back to the broadcast. It is Monday, February 12th, 2018. I'm Sean, your host. And today we're beginning our study in the book of Exodus. And it's a great book, very fun to read. There's just so much here. You have, and I'll get into that. I'll get into the details of what we're going to be covering here in just a minute. It's actually, in the Hebrew, the book is not called Exodus. It's actually called Shemot, or Shemos. And as you probably remember when we had this discussion when we started the book of Genesis, you know, the Torah portion is named after usually the first word or the first couple of words in the first sentence of the book. And then the book is also named that way. As an example, the first word in Genesis was Bereshit, and that's the name of the book, Bereshit. And here in the book of Exodus, the first sentence is La'ela Shemot, there's your word, B'nai Yisrael, which means, and these are the names of the children of Israel. And so Shemot means names, and that's the actual name of the book. And let me just give you a quick commentary or portion or a summary that you can get from TorahPortions.org. And it says Shemot is both the title for the second book from the scroll of the Torah and the title of the first Torah portion therein. Shemot means names. The English-speaking world calls this book Exodus. The Hebrew title for the book comes from an opening phrase of the book, now these are the named Shemot of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. The English name Exodus came from the Septuagint, the LXX, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. The Greek title for the book is Exodus Agiptu, which translates as departure from Egypt. The name Exodus is abbreviated form of that title. Exodus means departure. The book of Exodus tells the story of the children of Israel enslaved in Egypt and in their miraculous redemption through the hand of Moses. The story of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, the construction of the golden calf, and the construction of the tabernacle. And so that's what we're going to be getting into. And the first 6 chapters are all part of the Torah portion known as Shemot. And what we find is the children of Israel are in slavery. It seems that God, at first, has forgotten them, but God has not forgotten his promises. He remembers his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and brings a Redeemer to the children's children for the sake of his name with love. And so that's what we're going to be getting into today, and we're going to read the first 2 chapters today. And just so you know, we'll be studying the book of Exodus using, of course, the King James Bible, but also we're going to use our Art Scroll Chumash, which is basically a Hebrew Bible, alongside the King James Bible for this study. And, you know, that's how we started our study when we started Genesis several months ago, and then I moved exclusively over to the King James Bible just a few weeks into the study. We're going to try and begin this study the same way we began Genesis, and I'll explain more about that decision at the end of our study. But without further delay and more rambling, I just want to get right into this. We're going to read the first 2 chapters, and then we'll wrap it up. So Exodus chapter 1. And these are the names of the children of Israel who were coming to Egypt with Jacob. Each man and his household came: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all these persons who emerged from Jacob's lines were 70 souls. And Joseph was in Egypt. Joseph died, and all his brothers, and that entire generation. The children of Israel were fruitful, teemed, increased, and became strong, very, very much so. And the land became filled with them. A new king arose over Egypt, who did not know of Joseph. He said to his people, "Behold, the people, the children of Israel, are more numerous and stronger than we. Come, let us outsmart it, lest it become numerous, and it may be that, if a war will occur, it too may join our enemies, and wage war against us, and go up from the land." So here we have, the generation of Joseph and his brothers has passed on, and the children of Israel had continued to grow and to prosper. And then, a new Pharaoh comes along, and he sees this. He sees how numerous and strong and powerful and blessed they are, and he says, man, we've got to deal with these people, because if we get attacked and they join the side of our enemies, we're going to be in big trouble. And so that's kind of how this all begins with the slavery, as you might call it. Verse 11. So they appointed taskmasters over it, in order to afflict it with their burdens. It built storage cities for Pharaoh, Pithom, and Ramses. But as much as they would afflict it, so it would increase, and so it would spread out. And they became disgusted because of the children of Israel. The Egyptians enslaved the children of Israel with crushing harshness. They embittered their lives with hard work, with mortar and with bricks, and with every labor of the field. And their labors that they performed with them were with crushing harshness. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, of whom the name of the first was Shiphrah, and the name of the second was Puah. And he said, when you deliver the Hebrew women, and you see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you are to kill him. And if it is a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God, and they did not do the thing of the king of Egypt spoke of them. And they caused the boys to live. And the king of Egypt summoned the midwives, and he said unto them, why have you done this thing, that you have caused the boys to live? The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are unlike the Egyptian women, for they are experts. Before the midwife comes to them, they have given birth. God benefited the midwives, and the people increased and became very strong, and it was because the midwives feared God that he made them houses. Now, a couple of thoughts here. Number one, I was listening to a study on this portion and talking about the midwives, and one interpreter said, when the midwives come and they say that, we can't kill the babies because the women they're experts, or the King James, I believe, says lively. And when we get there, they've already given birth. One interpretation of the word that's used there is that it can also mean they're like beast, they're like animals. So almost, almost looking at them as non-human. Now the midwives weren't looking at them this way, but kind of playing into Pharaoh's hands, describing them like, the Hebrew women, they're like animals. They just give birth, and the animal just, the baby's just out in like no time. And it's kind of the way that they're describing this to Pharaoh, and which is why he kind of buys into it, kind of believes it. Notice he doesn't question this. He doesn't go, okay, yeah, right, we're all human here. I know how long it takes to give birth to a baby. He buys into what the midwives are saying here. So I just thought it was an interesting thought. And then secondly, I was curious, what does it mean that God made them houses? It says God benefited the midwives, and the people increased and became very strong, and it was because the midwives feared God that he made them houses. And the research that I've done, it appears that what it means by houses is that he kind of makes them like family dynasties. They grew stronger, and they ended up having, a family dynasty, and that's kind of what it means by houses. Generations of these midwives continued on through history. Is one way to interpret that. All right, verse 22. Pharaoh commanded his entire people, saying, Every son that will be born into the river shall you throw him, and every daughter you shall keep alive. Chapter 2, verse 1. A man went from the house of Levi. He took a daughter of Levi. The woman conceived and gave birth to a son. She saw that he was good, and she hid him for 3 months. She could not hide him any longer, so she took for him a wicker basket and smeared it with clay and pitch. She placed the boy into it and placed it among the reeds at the bank of the river. His sister stationed herself at a distance to know what would be done of him. Pharaoh's daughter went down to bathe by the river, and her maidens walked along the river. She saw the basket among the reeds, and she sent her maidservants, and she took it. She opened it, and she saw him, the boy, and behold, a youth was crying. She took pity on him, and she said, "This is one of the Hebrew boys." His sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and summon for you a wet nurse from the Hebrew women who will nurse the boy for you?" The daughter of Pharaoh said, "Go." The girl went and summoned the boy's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this boy and nurse him for me, and I will give your pay." So the woman took the boy and nursed him. The boy grew up, and she brought him to the daughter of Pharaoh, and he was a son to her. She called his name Moses, and she said, "For I drew him from the water." And of course, I'm always amazed by this. Here we have this woman. She gives birth. She's hiding the baby because the commandment that is that if a boy is born, it's to be thrown into the river. She hides him for 3 months, but it's gotten to the point where she can't hide him anymore. I also found it was interesting that he doesn't even have a name. Anytime when you read the scriptures, it says, and so gave birth to a son, and he called his name Jacob, or he called his name, whatever. Here it just says he gave birth to a son, doesn't give him a name. And he's finally given a name by the Pharaoh's daughter. She called his name Moshe. And what I found interesting is, okay, so she takes this leap of faith. I'm going to put him in a wicker basket and send him down the river, and hopefully something positive will happen to him. Otherwise, he's just going to be drowned in the river anyway. And so it's kind of a last-ditch effort, and the little girl, the sister, is watching this happen. And then miraculously, the Pharaoh's daughter finds the baby. The little sister goes, "Would you like me to find, someone to nurse the child?" And Moses ends up right back into his mother's hands, nursing her own son and being paid to do so. Like, if that's just, I don't know. I just find that absolutely amazing, and it just shows you what God can do. God can take a situation that seems hopeless and then turn it into an amazing circumstance. One that you couldn't have dreamt up yourself. Very, very amazing. All right, let's move on here. Verse 11. And it happened in those days that Moses grew up and went out to his brethren and observed their burdens. He saw an Egyptian man striking a Hebrew man of his brethren. He turned this way, and that he saw that there was no man, so he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. He went out the next day, and behold, 2 Hebrew men were fighting, and he said to the wicked one, "Why do you strike your fellow?" He replied, "Who appointed you as dignitary, a ruler, and a judge over us? Do you propose to murder me as you murdered the Egyptian?" Moses was frightened, and he thought, "Indeed, this matter is known." Pharaoh heard about this matter and sought to kill Moses. So Moses fled from before Pharaoh and settled in the land of Midian. He sat by a well. The minister of Midian had 7 daughters. They came and they drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's sheep. The shepherds came and drove them away. Moses got up and saved them and watered their sheep. They came to Reuel, their father, and he said, "How could you have come so quickly today?" They replied, "An Egyptian man saved us from the shepherds, and even drew water for us and watered the sheep." He said to his daughters, "Then where is he? Why did you leave the man? Summon him and let him eat bread." Moses desired to dwell with the man, and he gave his daughter Ziphrah to Moses. She gave birth to a son and named him Gershom, for he said, I have a stranger in a foreign land. I have been a stranger in a foreign land. During those many days it happened that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel groaned because of the work, and they cried out. Their outcry because of the work went up to God. God heard their moaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the children of Israel, and God knew. And that is the end of chapter 2. And I thought one other thing I think is interesting is you can already see Moses has that character of standing up for righteousness, right? He sees the Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. He stands up for him. He actually strikes down the Egyptian. Next day, he sees another Hebrew mistreating a Hebrew, and he calls him out on it. He says, why are you doing this evil thing? Then he sees these shepherdess being this guy's daughters that are trying to water the sheep, and they're being bothered, and Moses rises up and drives off the evil shepherds. So in just one chapter you see Moses 3 times taking a stand for what is right. And so you can already see that it's in his character to stand up for those who are oppressed. And we'll be reading a lot more about this in the next few months, and I am very, very hopeful that this will be a very exciting series. There's going to be a lot to learn. There's a lot that points to the Messiah that would come, and so I'm really, really looking forward to it. We're going to dive into some of the Hebrew meanings and some of that stuff that we were doing with the book of Genesis. Now, I have to address this because I stopped doing that when we were studying the book of Genesis, and here's the thing. I personally really enjoy looking into the Hebrew and studying the language, and I love sharing these things with all of you. However, I stopped with the Hebrew portions and the teaching with the book of Genesis because I got really frustrated with what you would call the Judaizers, those who come to the comments, come to the website, and say that they are Jew but lie because they're really of the synagogue of Satan. They're those who come like they did in Acts chapter 15. They come alongside the Galatians and they say, you must be circumcised and obey the law of Moses to be saved. And so while I'm willing to take a look, I take a Hebraic look at the book of Exodus and teach some of the Hebrew words and meanings and some of the possible understandings, I just have to put it out there that if you come to the comments promoting a different gospel, a gospel that tries to add to the cross of Christ, or promoting that you must use sacred names or any of that, I'm just going to ban you from the channel, because I just can't tolerate deception and lies on my channel, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this. What I would do is I would refer you to my teaching called Who is Israel Really? I also did a series called Returning to Messiah, and all that I recorded just a couple of months ago, so you can find it really easily in the archives. And so I'll leave it at that, but we will be looking at the commentary, both the commentaries that I use of Charles Spurgeon and Matthew Henry, but the Jewish commentary also that's found in the Tanakh and stuff like that. And we're going to try to take a deeper look at some of this stuff, and I'll also be trying to point out the foreshadows that we see, because there's going to be a lot. As we study the story of Moses and the Israelites, and then coming out of Egypt and going through the wilderness, and there's so much. Exodus is one of my favorite books, and so I'll be doing my best to point out and show you the foreshadows of the Messiah, who would come, and who in fact did come, and we know him as Jesus Christ. Well, that is the broadcast for this morning. I pray that it blessed you. I know it was just kind of an introduction to the book of Exodus, but we'll be getting into the meat of it over the next coming weeks, and I'm confident that it'll bless you. That's all I got for you this morning. Peace and grace be with all of you, and until next time, God bless.